Okay, we'll pick up in a
How
moment.
many are there in total?
96.
96, yeah, I looked at it online a little while back and it was a very red page.
What is it?
Yeah.
Schools like this.
Yeah.
Okay, so don't forget the hashtag is EU Digital Debate, so please do tweet about what's going on, and any questions, quite a bit of activity on this, that's good to see. The next topic we're going to move on to is data protection. What we'll do for this section is I'll just ask one question about each of these topics, because we spent the whole of the first section on one topic, and then hopefully we can get through a few different ones and see what everyone thinks about them. So let's start with data protection, and we'll go to Afzal Khan first from the Labour Party. Are you in favour of citizens having a right to delete data held about them?
Well, it's their data, isn't it? But I'll just go through actually first of all the Labour's position on this matter. In the European Parliament, EPLP, they have not actually discussed this subject up to now. Particularly of the NHS data, which there's a leaflet here as well. And what they seem to be saying is that actually we don't want this like mass data idea collections, but the next bit is this NHS, they want to see 3 different bits here. They think ultimately it's a good thing. There are a lot of positive things there in order to deal with the patient's stuff, and the benefits you can derive from there. But they feel that the current government, the way they're handling it, is the wrong way. So maybe they'll want to come back on that. The first one is actually that they should make it easier for the concerned patient to opt out of the proposal. So the second is to make the Secretary of State accountable for the use of patient data. And the third one is data must be genuinely anonymous. And they must not ensure that any unique identifiers such as the postcodes or NHS numbers they are also removed, so you can't basically identify. And then there's this issue of trade agreement with America and the concern which is linked to the whole NHS side of it, and also the data itself. How do we make sure that we protect that?
Okay, and we pass down this way, and next we have Jack Alnutt from the Pirate Party.
Yes, basically. I assume you're talking about the right to be forgotten, this principle?
Yes.
Yes, people should have the right to be forgotten, to have data about them deleted. I don't think it should be an absolute right. There are some cases where data does need to be held, especially where if there's an ongoing service, you can't just delete the data and continue on providing that service. Also, with regards to other jurisdictions, at the moment, American companies and a lot, if not most, tech companies aren't based in the European Union, they're based in America. And at the moment, they are subject to American law as well as EU law. And once data goes to those companies and the other jurisdiction says, no, you can't delete that data, or we have to have a copy of that data. So at the European level, I think we definitely need to make it clear that our data protection principles apply to our citizens' data. No ifs and no buts.
Laura Bannister from the Green Party.
So again, I would obviously agree with that also. This is, as I mentioned, something that we've fought for and won in the European Union's Data Protection Act. It's called the right to erasure, so the right to choose to have your data erased. And that's something we've campaigned successfully for. I think also it's about how easy it is to do that. I was looking the other day at how easy it is to get your data taken off the electoral register that gets sold to companies, because there's 2 versions of the electoral register, and you can tick a box to be not on the one that gets sold to companies. But when I read the small print, it turns out that that's only effective for 1 year, and if you want to be taken off it fully, then you have to actually write to your electoral office specifically to say you would like to be taken off. That's not exactly a well-publicised right that we have. So it's also about how easy we make it for people to have data erased and where from, and especially when it's being used for commercial purposes that has no benefit to the person concerned. It's not being kept for their ongoing health or for any kind of genuine social purpose. It's being kept for the purposes of profit, and I think that's something we especially need to keep an eye on.
Okay, Lee Slaughter from UKIP. What do you think about the right to be forgotten?
I think it's a fundamental right. I think the answer to the question as stated is yes, you should have the right to delete your data. But there's a more fundamental issue here. They shouldn't have the right to collect it without your permission. And the permission as granted, which Afzal referenced, was you can opt out. Nobody knew they can opt out, and nobody knew that they were going to sell the data on after they had not opted out. I had a row with my wife over this very issue with the medical records. I opted out. Mothers loving their children so much that they needed the best medical care and all the rubbish that was told. She opted in with the kids. Now their data's been sold, mine hasn't been sold. But these people should not have the power or the authority to A, collect it, or B, to sell it. Data is required by a doctor, your medical record, they're required. What's wrong with it being written down and sitting with a doctor who deals with you? It doesn't need to be on a database. It definitely should not be sold to American corporations. And in answer to the EU-US trade deal that we mentioned, these companies are all benefiting from it. The key element of that EU-US trade deal is that national governments within the EU cannot object to it, they cannot change law around it, and if they do, they can be sued for loss of earnings, loss of revenue, and loss of profit, and the court will decide what that profit is. None of this is being debated, and this is a law that the European Union is trying to ram through European structures today. And if that goes through, that is a real game changer for everybody.
Okay, Chris Whiteside from the Conservatives.
People should have a right to see what data is held on them. People should have the right to challenge anything that's wrong with that data and make sure that there's no incorrect data held on them. There are certainly a large number of circumstances where people should have the right to delete their data. I think it was Jack said it can't be an absolute right. Obviously, people shouldn't have the right to excise unspent convictions from files which may determine whether they can work, say, for example, with children or in other circumstances like that. You have to have a limit, sorry, but in general, we should have as much of a right for people to eliminate data from themselves as is practical, as is consistent with public safety.
Okay, and Robert Skelton from the Social Equality Party.
Socialist Equality.
Sorry. I'm sorry, I was given the wrong notes.
All right.
There we go. Socialist Equality Party.
Under capitalism, every single thing is a commodity to sell. And what we've done, revelations in the last few weeks in terms of what they're planning for all the NHS data, which is staggering amounts of data again, to hide this off and to just sell it off to private corporations, demonstrates the kind of blatant disregard for these issues that exists in ruling circles. You know, this is just everyday business as far as I'm concerned. You know, the corporations run the governments, and there's a revolving door between them at all times. You know, and you see it on every major question. So the SCP demands that this is an inalienable right. That your data belongs to you, not to governments and corporations to sell and do as they wish with it. You know, we've discussed earlier on, you know, the vast amounts of data that exists that has been collected on people. This has to be stopped and done away with. You know, ASAP. This is what we put forward as our strategy on these questions.
Yeah, and just as a correction there before we throw it open to people, I wasn't given the wrong notes. I entered it wrong into my iPad, so I'm going to blame my iPad's autocorrect instead. Maybe Apple doesn't think socialism is a thing. Maybe it autocorrects socialism into but anyway, yes.
It's a bit 1994, isn't it?
Yes. Okay. Yes. Questions on data protection.
With regards, you specifically mentioned with regards to spent convictions not being deletable, which I understand entirely, but what are your feelings with regards to, say, non-convictions and when people have been stopped and searched by police, with that data sharing with Interpol, with the National Extremist Database, which any one of us could be on, especially myself? for a number of reasons. But what are your feelings with regards to that information, that being protected, and the deletion of that data or not, and the fact that, say, the Metropolitan Police say no data can possibly be deleted off their database, which is the National Police Database?
Okay, so responses to that.
I would like this one. I think it's extremely important that that kind of data gets deleted. As has been mentioned, people are innocent until they're proven guilty. People will have gone through a charge for a court case. If they've been charged with a crime, they will have gone through a court case, and it will have been decided if they're innocent or guilty. If they are innocent, then all records of that should be removed. It should not have any effect on their life. I'm at the moment on charge for obstruction of a police officer and obstruction of a highway. If I had a less sympathetic employer, it's quite likely I might have lost my job. And I know a lot of people are put off from taking part in peaceful protest because they know that the police can arrest you if they choose to do so. It's not something that's necessarily within your control, and that may have incredibly serious implications for your career and for your life. So I think allowing that kind of information to be held when people have no right to reply, the whole point of a charge that's not gone through court yet is that you haven't had a chance yet to reply on that, is that it can quash vandalism and it can suppress forms of political dissent that should be available to everybody. So I feel very strongly that that is not relevant information that should be held about people.
We've seen this with the DNA database. And despite court rulings, the data was held about people who were proven innocent in the court of law, and that can't happen. That can't continue to happen. There can't be any repeats of that happening. And it is probably most important when people have gone through the judicial process and have been found innocent, or rather have not been found guilty, that the data about that is then deleted or removed, destroyed, however it's kept. You do need to keep some data about when you're building a case against somebody, especially, over a long period of time, perhaps, as offences keep occurring. So again, there has to be a balance between what data is kept and when data is deleted, and data should be deleted as soon as possible is our position there. And as soon as possible doesn't mean when it's convenient. As soon as possible doesn't mean, we may need it later, let's keep it around and make sure. It means as soon as that data is no longer being used actively, it must go.
Just to declare, I've been a police officer as well in the Greater Manchester Police, and my understanding is actually that you have a right to have the data deleted, or even the evidence, if you like, fingerprints they used to have, to actually to destroy it. And if they're refusing that, you also have a right to take the matter to the court. On a principle point, it's pretty fundamental. If you're innocent, you have a right to have that destroyed.
I think data is necessary. We all have to use services, whether it be medical, whether it be council records. Data is necessary, so we have to look at this data in the terms of what it is and how it's collected and why. And technology, the ability to database, the ability to data mine, all of the things that this group stands for in terms of trying to control. This is the problem. Data is good if it sits on a paper record with a doctor. Data is good if it sits on a laptop in the council offices about the rent, about benefits, about children's education. That's fine. The problem comes when big multinational organisations like the EU, places like Westminster, that are determined to database everybody and everything, and then the selling of that data to large corporations or anybody else comes to that. The issue of data itself we need data. Everybody has to have a record. We need to know what our children are doing, medical records, etc. And some things like criminal records have to be kept for public safety. But it's not the data itself that's the issue. It's the ability now to manipulate that data, to store it, to mine it, and to change it, and to use it against the general population.
Thank you. I'm actually surprised it took this long to get onto the question of DNA databases and the implications of them, which are immense. I'm an econometrician by profession, that's a statistical economist, and one of the things that frightens me about the DNA information, used as part of proper police work, it is an enormous asset to justice, but misused, it's an enormous potential for causing travesties of justice. And that's why I believe that the Scottish system for DNA database is far more appropriate than the one that we had in this country. The present government has legislated, and by God aren't we having difficulty getting the legislation actually implemented properly, but we are moving in the right direction to ensure that the DNA of people charged and accused in the vast majority of cases, people who are not convicted, people who are innocent, is destroyed, rather than held on record, because we have in this country, as it says in one of the documents you've got at the back, one of the largest DNA databases, and that is potentially a very real problem, in that evidence actually shows that running through matches against a big DNA database can be a recipe, especially if you have prosecutors and juries who don't understand statistics and defence barristers who don't point out the problems with it. It's a recipe for somebody standing up and saying, there's a 5 million to 1 chance this is the right person. Well, that's another way of saying there's 10 people in the country who have a DNA match that good. And we do not want that kind of miscarriages of justice. So yes, we've got to look very carefully at this sort of database. You did say, sir, I think you picked up the fact that I carefully said unspent convictions. The inference that you draw, yes, I was meaning spent convictions, yes, we cannot have unspent convictions or people being accused of trivial offences staying on the database and making it impossible for people to clear their name and go straight. It does get very, very difficult when you're talking about some sexual predators and how we make sure we catch them. Take, for example, the Soham killer. He had a record of time after time after time of just getting away with it. And eventually, unfortunately, he killed 2 young girls. And that's why, I mean, people attacked the present government when we put through the legislation to restrict the DNA database. Were we risking the possibility of more people like that getting away with it? There are some special cases where people have been accused of offences like rape or murder, where you need, under the tightest of controls, to be ready to try and build up a picture to make sure that people like that monster don't get an opportunity to carry out crimes like that. But you have to have the most strict safeguards to make sure that doesn't enable your databases of information about people to grow like Topsy and end up causing not be guilty to go to jail for the innocent.
Okay, Robert Skelton.
Yeah, I mean, the fact that this question needs to be even posed demonstrates how we've moved away from a defence of basic democratic rights. We have a. I mean, you know, it's very. I mean, obviously, if someone's been proven innocent, you know, no data should be held. But overall, no data should be collected and held on any individual. Just to refer you back to GCHQ, you have the program called Tempora, which has been made available by Edward Snowden, and what it consists of. That, I'm using programs like X-Keyscore. It requires hundreds and hundreds of GCHQ employees just to filter the vast data that's collected on every individual. And we are talking about every individual in the world here. We're not talking about just the population of 1 or 2 countries. It's a vast network. So what fundamentally has to be done is to end this system of state surveillance. You can only do that through waging an unceasing and unfinance struggle against the capitalist system. Why do, again, come back to it, why is all this surveillance required? You know, in the 21st century? You know, what's the purpose for it? And I hope we can come back to these questions later on.
Okay. Do you need to go? Yeah. Okay. Afzal Khan from Labour, I think you have to leave now, is that right? Yeah. Well, thank you very much for taking part, and your contribution was very much valued. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Can I apologise? I'm sorry, I have another commitment, and it's been really informative. I'll take my 2 minutes now. Now that you've given me mic. Yeah, thank you very much, actually, all of you for coming here as well. I'll just take 2 minutes and just say this. You know, we're in a city which invented the computer, and I've actually seen the room myself where this huge computer was built. But one thing is very clear, the pace of change is absolutely phenomenal. The scale of the computers that we have, and we heard earlier on, the whole world's data can be collected. The mobile phone we have, I was told, actually has got better technology than the first Apollo, which was sent into the orbit. And that wasn't that long ago. So you see the pace which is changing so rapidly. And the other thing I was shocked about was, you know, the lenses. They recently released this camera and it can actually spot a hair 500 miles away. It's absolutely phenomenal stuff, the technology, the pace that this is happening and the changes occurring. So I think technology itself is not bad. There's a question of balancing idea which needs to be done. So it's check and balance which is required to prevent the abuse, which I think is probably a sensible position. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so we're going to go on to the next. Sorry, yes,
Can I ask if it's an official UK policy that should be kept on paper for UK that medical records?
Sorry, I didn't hear the beginning of that.
Can I just ask if it's a formal or wider policy that UK that medical records should be kept on paper?
No, it's not.
Without your personal opinion?
It's not an official policy. As an opinion, yes, it's my opinion. It's more to do with the storage and use of data, and I was using this as an example to make the point. The fact is that data just does not need to be in databases. It doesn't need to be in vast databases that can be manipulated and sold. The point of saying the medical records on paper, if your GP puts you on a laptop, that doesn't really matter whether it's soft copy or hard copy. The point is it should stay with him and not be traded around either the NHS, the Department of Health, or internationally with companies. That was the point I was making. So it's not really the issue of whether it's paper copy. The point is that data should stay where it's supposed to be, not traded around. On paper, it's just easier to do that.
Make sure he doesn't connect his laptop to the internet or buy it in America.
Which is why I use the example of hard copy paper records, because everybody's familiar, well, my age group are anyway, with paper records of doctors. And this transfer of that into a database, into soft copy, that's what makes it easy to manipulate, to stick into data warehousing, to start playing around with. So it's not UKIP policy to use paper records, but I hope by using that example it just made the point.
I think my concern is that you prevent progress with, your policy could get to a point where you prevent progress. And, I think no one on the panel would agree that databases and all this stuff cannot be used for, good and can make our lives.
They can, but this goes to the oversight. This goes to protection.
But the blanket position to say, this has got to stay on one laptop, on one laptop.
No, okay, let me clarify that. I was using the hard copy, paper copy as an example of where data should be. Whether you put it on a database, whether it sits on paper or a laptop or a server somewhere, the point is it should not be traded. It should stay where it's supposed to be for the uses that it was given, not to be traded on this international market, which is now developing with healthcare, with DNA, and all sorts of other tax records. They're about to be sold off, I believe. It wasn't the fact that it's paper. The fact is it's not. It shouldn't be used as a tool.
Okay. A couple of people want to come back. Laura Bannister.
I'm glad you clarified that, because I thought that was a strange development if we're suggesting this. I think it's important that we don't get drawn into kind of making it seem like any collection or use of data is a bad thing. Of course it isn't. This is about who's using it and why. So perhaps I agree with the point you did finally make, which is that this is to do with collecting data for medical use and sharing it between medical professionals is clearly sensible. I called an ambulance for a woman today who had a complex case of epilepsy. It would be really, it would really make sense if when she went to hospital, the doctors treating her there could see the medical record that's been created for her and how she's responded to various other treatments. But it's a whole step change away from that. To then start considering selling that data for commercial purposes, so that private healthcare companies can market goods at us, can try and encourage the privatisation of our NHS through by encouraging us to take up those kind of private health services and so on. That's a complete step change away. So I think we need to be careful about muddying the water and talking about all data collection as being part of a kind of evil government surveillance thing. We really are talking about two different things.
So we'll come back in a moment. Chris Whiteside, you have a prop there?
Yeah, I mean, I keep this on my keyring. I'm sure most of you probably have things like this as well. Obviously, if something has anything on any computer, when something like this can hold the entire nation's tax records, and some twit can leave it in the pub, we have a problem. That's why it's very important that all private data should be properly encrypted. Equally, we can't be going back like the Luddites to the Stone Age and trying to have our public services give people proper care unless we're willing to use the massive data that's available to the maximum extent. And certainly, the amount of information which our doctors need to look after us is very considerable. I wouldn't want to see them going back to putting that on paper. I wouldn't want to have a situation where we have to lug paper files across every time we move in the country and change our GP and so on. But we've got to recognise whatever solution we have, we need to protect people's data.
And Jack Alnutt.
Yeah, just to kind of generalise this, I think. There are two principles that I'd like to state here, and that is that data should only be used for the purpose that it's collected for. If you go to your GP, you expect that your medical records are only used to treat you, or perhaps your immediate relatives, your children, your parents, your brothers, sisters, etc. And the other one, which has just completely slipped my mind. I'm sorry.
It'll come back to you.
Yeah. I was going to go on to proper encryption and protection of the data. And if you can't protect the data, if you can't encrypt it properly, you shouldn't be processing it at all.
Correct.
Okay, we really have to move to the next topic now, and we'll start with Robert Skelton and move down from the Socialist Equality Party. We're going to go into net neutrality now, which is a bit of a hot button topic. The European Parliament recently agreed a new law to protect net neutrality within the European Union, although it does still face some final hurdles. So Robert, should it be passed into law?
Well, there are real dangers afoot regarding this issue, because the internet was developed originally, obviously, out of the United States military capabilities, the role of the Great Lord Tim Berners-Lee in advancing, made a great advance in human progress in society. But the internet does increasingly, the danger is it risks being the freedom of the internet and all the abilities inherent within it, risk being obliterated by its ownership increasingly by private corporations who are demanding the right that their services and things they wish to sell and are given privacy. And it's a very dangerous situation. In terms of, obviously we know the issue of everyone's communication is being monitored constantly. But again, this is a fundamental question. We are completely opposed to the so-called right of corporations to have any say at all in determining the future of the internet. The internet was a tremendous advance for mankind, and it should be the internet should be a free and open society for all. That's our position on the question.
And Chris Whiteside, Conservatives?
Yes, we support a free, open, innovative and safe internet, and we support the multi-user, multi-stakeholder approach. It is very important that people have the right to privacy. That includes people who happen to be running a small business or even a large business, provided what we're talking about is their own data and not other people's. Tim Berners-Lee actually made a suggestion that we need more of a public debate about what sort of internet we want, and the Conservatives very much welcome that suggestion. We think that's a good idea. There should be more public debate about this. But yes, we do think we want to see the sort of open, free internet in which people do have privacy, and which it's important that people have control over their own data.